Hello, and welcome to our well-being series on managing procrastination in graduate school. My name is Irena, and I'm a clinical fellow here at the JC Wellness Center. I recently co-facilitated this workshop with Dr. Michelle Chu, and so I'd like to share some of the major highlights from our workshop with you. So to begin, we sort of set a workshop agenda and broke it down into three main pieces. First, developing a better understanding of the different types of procrastination and the factors that maintain it. Second, to increase awareness of our own procrastinating behaviors and its cycle. And lastly, to learn some useful techniques and strategies to overcome our procrastinating behaviors. So to begin, I think it's really important to understand the definition of procrastination, what it is and what it is not. And what procrastination is not is laziness. Procrastination is not laziness. Procrastination, on the other hand, is making a decision for no valid reason to delay or not complete a task or a goal that you've committed to, and instead doing something of lesser importance despite there being negative consequences to not following through on the original task or goal. So these are all of the different life areas that procrastination can influence and impact us on. So I think as graduate students, we're aware of the influence of procrastination on our schoolwork and in our work lives. But procrastination can influence us in terms of household responsibilities, relationships, financial responsibilities, health responsibilities, self-development, and decision-making. So a big chunk of our time in the workshop was focused on this procrastination cycle. And this cycle really helps us to truly understand what it is that we're doing when we procrastinate. And it allows us to sort of pave a clear path forward as to what we need to do to overcome that procrastination. So as I go through each of these aspects of the cycle, I'll also provide an example that makes it a little bit more concrete. So first, the task. In order to start off procrastinating, we need to have a task or a goal that we previously committed to that is a priority in our lives. The task or the goal can be from any of those different areas of our lives that we saw in the previous slide: work, household, social, family, relationships, etc. But I think in this particular example, to make it more relatable, the task will be related to work or study. So let's just say that our task is having to write a paper or to complete a project that's due soon. So that is the task, having to write a paper or complete a project. The next step in the procrastination cycle is unhelpful rules and assumptions. So when we approach our task or goal, one or more of our unhelpful rules and assumptions gets activated. So what are these rules and assumptions? Well, they can be related to needing to feel in charge. They can be related to pleasure seeking. They can be related to a fear of failure or disapproval, or a fear of uncertainty. They can be related to low self-confidence and even related to depleted energy. So once these are activated, our rules and assumptions really start to guide how we think and feel about doing the task. Essentially, they make the task appear more aversive, and they arouse some discomfort about actually following through and doing the task. So in our example of having to write a paper, we may have an unhelpful rule or assumption such as, I must do this perfectly, otherwise I will fail, or others will think badly of me, or others will judge me negatively. So the unhelpful rule or assumption in this case would be a fear of failure or disapproval. Next, we move on to the perceived discomfort in step 3 of the cycle. If we then detect discomfort, it's going to make us a lot less likely to actually want to do the task. So if you're a person who can't stand feeling uncomfortable or can't tolerate unpleasant feelings, you're going to have even more problems with following through on the task. The urge to avoid these feelings and dodge the discomfort is going to build and build and build. And overall, you'll become discomfort driven. So in our example of having to write this paper, the perceived discomfort may be related to feelings of anxiety or the fear, right? That fear of failure or disapproval, or feelings of embarrassment. And these feelings can be associated to thoughts of, I can't stand these feelings are too much. And we would then have the urge to avoid that discomfort. And that's when we move on to step number 4 of the procrastination cycle, procrastination excuses. So when we're discomfort driven, we start to think of all of these excuses that justify and make our procrastination okay in some way. And the fact of the matter is that there's often a kernel of truth to these excuses. And so we conclude that we're just better off doing the task at a later time. So in our example of having to write a paper or complete a project, we might have feelings of anxiety or fear or embarrassment and have the thought that I can't handle these feelings. And so we might have the excuse of, well, I don't have everything I need right now. I can't start. I don't have all the resources available. I can't start now. It's not going to be perfect without all of my resources. Or you might have the excuse of, I'm just not in the mood right now. It's going to be better to do it when I'm actually in the mood. My work will be better quality when I'm in the mood. And so after these excuses, we engage in some procrastination activities in step 5. The more discomfort driven you are, the more convincing your excuses are, the more likely you'll actually procrastinate by engaging in other activities that divert your attention from that goal or that task. And these procrastination activities might be related to pleasurable activities, lower priority tasks, socializing, daydreaming, engaging in other distractions. So, for example, we might check our emails as a lower priority task. We might binge watch that new show on Netflix that just came out as a pleasurable task. Or we might scroll through social media or chat with our friends or play some video games as another procrastination activity. Moving on to step number 6 is the short-term rewards, right? These are those positive consequences that you may experience from procrastinating. And these positive consequences only strengthen our procrastination because they have a payoff. So we might relieve our initial discomfort. We might have gained some pleasure from that procrastination activity that we engaged in. And so because there are these positive short-term rewards, it makes it more likely that we'll engage in procrastination next time. And the last step of our procrastination cycle is those long-term negative consequences. These are those that you might experience from procrastinating that also will make you more likely to procrastinate next time around. And the reason is because we feel even more discomfort because we haven't achieved the task. We might keep those unhelpful rules and assumptions. They're going to be intact because we haven't challenged them. And our tasks will keep piling up. And the more they pile up, the longer our to-do list is and the more demands and time pressures we have. So as you can see, at the end of the day, procrastination is really about needing to avoid some sort of discomfort about doing a task that arises because of certain unhelpful rules and assumptions we hold about ourselves. And we excuse our procrastination and we feel it's justified. And that makes it even more likely that we're going to procrastinate. And the payoffs, whether they're positive or negative, just keep us stuck in this habit and make it more likely that we engage in this vicious procrastination cycle. So what can we do? Well, we can put off procrastination. Although that's easier said than done, we will talk about some helpful tips and techniques to take action now and put off the procrastination. We can change those conclusions. So remember, our procrastination excuses often revolve around identifying some truth about the situation. So yes, there is the truth of the fact that we may be tired, and yet we can also challenge that conclusion. And we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. And we can dispute and test these conclusions as a means of combating them, which we'll also talk about. So here are some truths and some unhelpful conclusions. Feeling really tired, the unhelpful conclusion would be, I'm better off doing it after I have rested. Or moving a little bit down the list, I don't feel inspired, I'll wait until I do. And I think one that often comes up is, I work better under pressure, so I will leave it to the last minute. So these are some of those truths that lead to some unhelpful conclusions and make us feel justified in engaging in the procrastination. So what can we do? Well, we can learn to negotiate with ourselves. And the way we do that is by asking disputing questions. What is the factual evidence or reasons that it is better for me to put off the task or the goal? If I do make some start on the task or goal right now, what might happen? How might I feel? So these are ways to activate yourself behaviorally, to start the task, to make it a little bit easier to keep going with the task. And as you'll see, when you start with that momentum, when you start actually engaging in it, you find that it's not as bad as you thought it was going to be. And asking these disputing questions really activates these parts of ourselves to challenge those unhelpful conclusions, to look at the factual evidence, to think about the reasons why, and really challenge those unhelpful rules and assumptions that we have. The other way you can do this is setting an experiment. Next time you find yourself making one of these procrastination excuses, use a scale of 0 to 10 and rate how fatigued or unmotivated or uninspired you are. Then set yourself a small amount of time and do the task, whether that be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever seems reasonable and realistic for you. And after working on that task for that set amount of time, re-rate how you feel. Go back to that scale. Re-rate how you feel. Compare it to your first rating and reflect on what you have achieved during that short amount of time you worked on the task. This is another way to activate yourself behaviorally, to challenge those conclusions and those unhelpful rules and assumptions we have. So we've all heard the phrase, just do it, but nobody really tells us how to do it. So we really have to come up with some practical ways of overcoming our procrastination, knowing what needs to be done, how to do it, when to do it. And the best way to do that is to really be clear about what you need to do. You'll know what you're up against. You'll have a better idea of how to proceed. And knowing what you need to do, having clarity on the task will help you prioritize, will help you break the task down into chunks, and will help you allocate the appropriate amount of time to getting it done. So prioritizing is really just creating a to-do list of tasks and goals you need to work on, thinking about how realistic it is to achieve these things in the time allocated. Grading really means breaking the task down into chunks that seem less overwhelming, that are more realistic, that are more achievable, breaking them down into smaller pieces. And allocating time is really just improving your time telling. Knowing how much time to allocate to the different tasks and responsibilities you have so that you can better prioritize, better plan, better schedule. Ways to make the task easier? Well, the overall aim is to take it one step at a time. There are a number of different possibilities, especially on this list, and there is no right way. It's really about experimenting with what works for you. I'll highlight a few key ones that I think could be the most helpful. Worst first, knock out that worst task first, and all the other tasks you need to do will seem like a breeze. The Pomodoro technique has been quite effective for a lot of people, which just basically means you set a specific amount of time to work on a task. You stick to that time rather than extending it. And this makes it more likely that you'll actually get started on that task, knowing that you only have 10 or 15 or 30 minutes to work on it. Prime time and prime place determine the time of day that you are most productive or energized. Prime place determine what types of environments are most conducive to you. And plan rewards. Often the things that we use as rewards are the very things that distract us from getting the task done. So instead of engaging in them as distractors and feeling guilty, we can use them as rewards that we earned. And finding the balance between pleasure and achievement is really key to being a doer rather than a procrastinator. Lastly, accountability. Being an autonomous individual means being accountable to yourself by being assertive about your limits and honoring your boundaries. So it's important to not overcommit, to be realistic with ourselves and with our boundaries. Oftentimes, it can be extremely helpful to choose an accountability buddy to keep yourself and the other and keep each other motivated and accountable. And don't overcommit, as I said. Don't overwhelm yourself. Be realistic. The overall goal is to stop the avoidance and get tasks that we need to get done. This is a reference in case you are interested in learning more. Thank you for joining. I thank you for watching, and I hope some of these tips and techniques and things that we talked about are helpful for you. Thank you.